Picture a brain the size of a chimpanzee's, about as big as a grapefruit. Now picture it sitting where yours is. Picture trying to plan a hunt, coordinate a group, outthink a predator with a third of what you're using right now. You'd assume it couldn't be done. Most scientists did too. The measurement is real. 380 cubic centimeters, give or take, about a third the size of yours. Now picture that brain making a stone tool sharp enough to cut through elephant hide. Picture it knapping blades, planning a hunt, organizing a group of people to bring down an animal 4 times their size, on an island they had no obvious way of reaching in the first place. Scientists looked at the numbers and the behavior side by side and didn't know what to do with them. Some said it was impossible, that a brain this small couldn't do what the evidence said it did. They suggested the bones must belong to a sick modern human, a person with a disorder, anything except what it actually was. What it actually was stood about as tall as a 4-year-old child and lived on a remote Indonesian island for the better part of 1 million years. This is the story of the other humans, the smallest ones, and the ones who, by every rule you've probably grown up trusting about intelligence, shouldn't have been able to do what they did. In August 2003, a joint Australian-Indonesian team was digging in a limestone cave on the island of Flores, in Indonesia, looking for something else entirely, evidence of the early human migration from Asia toward Australia. The cave is called Liang Bua. It means cool cave. What they found instead was a nearly complete skeleton, small skull, short limbs, a pelvis and leg bones that belonged to an adult who stood about 1 meter tall. If you'd been standing in that trench, this is the moment you would have known something was wrong with everything you thought you understood about human history. The lead archaeologist was Morwood. The skeletal analysis was led by Peter Brown, an expert in cranial and dental anatomy. Together with their team, they published the findings in the journal Nature in October 2004, naming it Homo floresiensis, a new species of human, distinct from us, distinct from Homo erectus, found nowhere else on Earth. The skeleton was nicknamed LB1. Then it got a second name, Flo, the little lady of Flores. She was around 30 years old when she died. Her brain was somewhere between 380 and 420 cubic centimeters. For comparison, yours is around 1,300. Hers was closer to a chimpanzee's than to a modern human's. The skeptics arrived almost immediately, and if you're being honest, you might have been one of them. A brain that small, some argued, could not belong to a healthy, fully functional adult human. It had to be pathology, a person with a growth disorder or a form of microcephaly, dressed up as a new species because a new species makes a better headline. But the team kept digging. By the time they were done, they'd recovered partial remains from at least 9 more individuals at Liang Bua, children and adults, spanning thousands of years. This wasn't one sick individual, it was a population, a society that had been quietly going about its existence for somewhere close to 1 million years, before a team with shovels and a research grant ever knew it was there. And here is the detail that should stop you. Those bones aren't even the oldest evidence. In 2016, researchers working 70 kilometers east of Liang Bua, at a site called Mata Menga, found teeth and a jaw fragment from individuals just as small, dated to 700,000 years old. 500,000 years before Flo was born. Something this size, with a brain this small, was already living on this island. Whether they shrank slowly over those hundreds of thousands of years, or arrived on Flores already small and stayed that way, is still being argued over. Recent finds at Mata Menga have only made the timeline messier, not cleaner. Here is where the story stops being simple. Alongside the bones at Liang Bua, archaeologists found stone tools. Hundreds of them. Sharp-edged flakes, points, blades. Some simple, some more elaborate than anyone expected from a brain a third the size of yours. The tools at the site span an enormous window of time, from roughly 190,000 years old, down to about 50,000. Meaning generation after generation of this same small population kept making them, refining them, passing the technique down. And it wasn't just stoneworking. Researchers found stegodon bones, a now extinct dwarf elephant species, the largest animal on the island, bearing cut marks from those same tools. Hundreds of bone fragments, many from young stegodon, show clear signs of butchery. This wasn't scavenging leftovers. This was a small-bodied, small-brained species, coordinating to bring down and process an animal, many times their size, on a regular basis, for tens of thousands of years. This is the part that broke the old assumption. Probably your assumption too, if nobody had ever told you otherwise. For most of the 20th century, the working theory in human evolution was simple. Brain size tracks roughly with capability. Bigger brain, more sophisticated behavior. Homo floresiensis didn't just bend that rule, it seemed to ignore it completely. One 2007 paper studying the skeleton put the problem in stark terms. If this species really made and used tools this complex with a brain this small, the brain tissue itself would have to be doing something fundamentally different from what equivalent tissue does in a modern human or in a chimpanzee. The paper's authors noted that, going by ordinary human medical standards, a brain that size would be classified as severe microcephaly, a condition normally associated with profound cognitive impairment, yet the archaeological record showed none of that. The leading explanation now isn't that Homo floresiensis somehow got more out of less brain matter through sheer luck. It's that the brain reorganized, not bigger but rewired, with proportions and connections shifted to preserve the specific cognitive functions toolmaking actually requires, while shedding the energy cost of size everywhere else. Evolution didn't keep the brain big, it kept the parts of the brain that mattered for survival, and let the rest go. That's the part that should make you uncomfortable, in a good way. Somewhere on a remote island, intelligence and brain size quietly came apart from each other, and nobody, for 1,000,000 years, was around to notice. So how did they even get there? Flores has never been connected to the Asian mainland, not even at the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age. The water crossing is at least 24 kilometers of open ocean, even at its narrowest point, and it sits inside a stretch of sea known to researchers as the Wallace Line, a boundary so effective at blocking migration that the animals on one side are almost completely different from the animals on the other. Stand on that shore yourself today, and 24 kilometers of open water is still a serious swim. Try to picture making that crossing with no boat, no idea what's on the other side, and a brain a third the size of yours. Modern humans cross oceans with boats we build on purpose. Homo erectus, the species many researchers think were the likely ancestors of Homo floresiensis, isn't known to have had that capability. Nobody has found a boat. Nobody knows if there was one. The leading theory is something closer to an accident. Animals occasionally raft across short ocean gaps on floating vegetation, swept out during storms, and possibly early hominins did too. But this is genuinely unresolved. Researchers say plainly that how, or even when, this species reached Flores is unknown. No boat has ever been found. No second route has been confirmed. The crossing itself may be a mystery that this field never fully solves. Whatever method got them there, once they arrived, the island did the rest. Flores had no large predators. Resources were limited. Large bodies are expensive to maintain. They need more food, more energy, more of everything an isolated island can't reliably provide. So, over enormous stretches of time, bodies got smaller. Brains got smaller too, though not in lockstep, and not, as Part 2 showed, in a way that erased what those brains could still do. This pattern has a name: island dwarfism. It isn't unique to humans. The stegodon elephants on Flores were also a dwarfed species, a fraction the size of mainland elephants, sharing the same island, the same evolutionary pressure, the same shrinking logic. Two completely different kinds of animal, responding to the same isolated patch of land in the same way. They weren't a failed, stunted version of a real human species. They were a different solution, arrived at over hundreds of thousands of years, to one of the strangest evolutionary puzzles their world had to offer. How do you stay a person when everything about being a person tells your body to be smaller? For a long time, the story told about the end of Homo floresiensis was clear. Modern humans arrived in the region. The hobbits couldn't compete. They disappeared. It's the version you'd guess too, if you had to guess. Newcomers show up. The smaller species loses. Simple. Familiar. Probably wrong. That story is now being revised, in real time, as new evidence comes in. Here's a twist to start with. For years, researchers thought they had proof the hobbits controlled fire. Burned bone and charcoal, right there in the cave's upper layers. It would have been one of the most remarkable details in the whole story. A population with a brain size a third of ours, mastering something we usually treat as a defining human achievement. Then the dating got sharper. Those fire traces turned out to belong to a much later occupation of the same cave. People who arrived long after Homo floresiensis was already gone. The hobbits never had fire, as far as anyone can currently tell. The field built a striking detail and then had to take it back. That's the kind of correction this whole ending is built on. So here's what actually holds up. The most recent dating puts the last confirmed trace of Homo floresiensis at Liang Bua at around 50,000 years ago. For years, that number sat uncomfortably close to the arrival of Homo sapiens in the region. Close enough that direct competition, maybe even conflict, looked like the obvious explanation. But newer research complicates that timeline. A detailed study of the cave's sediment layers found something nobody expected: a long stretch of intensifying drought at Liang Bua in the tens of thousands of years before that final date. Declining rainfall, shrinking water sources, a corresponding drop in the stegodon population the hobbits depended on for food. And here's the part that actually changes the story. That same research suggests Homo floresiensis vanished from the site before modern humans definitively arrived there. At this specific cave, the climate did the damage first, possibly before the two species ever crossed paths at all. That doesn't mean modern humans played no role anywhere on Flores. It means the old, simple story, bigger-brained newcomers wipe out the smaller species through direct competition, may not be the whole answer, or even the right one. If you came into this episode already holding that assumption, you're not alone, and you're not entirely wrong either. You're just ahead of where the evidence actually is. The honest current picture is an environment quietly turning against them, a primary food source disappearing, and a population that had survived for the better part of 1 million years finally running out of room to adapt. What's left, the same as it's always been, is roughly 1.4 million years of presence on that island, and 50,000 years of silence afterwards, until a team with shovels showed up looking for something else and found them by accident. You're hearing about it because they did. Picture a Neanderthal. Scientists have given you that face. Heavy brow, broad nose, built from real skulls, real measurements. Picture a Denisovan. There's almost nothing to build from, but at least the DNA tells you something. That some piece of them is woven into people alive right now. Now try to picture Homo floresiensis, and notice what your instinct does first. Your brain reaches for small, for primitive. Maybe, if you grew up on the word the way most of us did, for hobbit, something smaller and stranger and slightly less than human. That instinct is exactly the mistake this episode has been trying to undo. There is no Homo floresiensis DNA in you. Not a fragment, not a percentage. Every other species this channel has covered, you carry some thread of forward. This one, you don't. The line ended completely, on one remote island, and nothing of their biology made it into yours. But here's what should actually unsettle you, more than any blood test could. A brain a third the size of yours, on an island nobody thought archaic humans should have been able to reach. Made tools good enough that some scientists' first instinct was to insist a real human must have made them instead. Anyone, anything, except a brain that small, doing exactly what the evidence showed it was doing. They weren't a lesser version of a person. They were proof that the ruler we'd been using to measure person was the wrong ruler. You don't absorb them. You can't. There's nothing left in you that's theirs. But the next time you measure someone by one number, a score, a scan, a single test that was supposed to settle the question before the evidence got a chance to speak, remember the 1-meter-tall woman with a brain the size of a grapefruit who broke that math 1 million years before you were born to need the lesson. They didn't disappear because they were too small to matter. You're the one who almost made that mistake. She's the reason you don't have to.